That takes long. Perfect. So we're back. Last session of the day. Unfortunately, all of my jokes that I made yesterday will not land today because Alex Mang is. Where is he? He went off again. Okay, now that I can actually make jokes of him, he's gone. Damn vampires. Always the same. He's from Romania, so hence why. So that didn't land. All right. Last session of the day. You've heard about Magnus this morning on security. You heard on access practices. You heard about ACA. You heard about how to start your business. Now I'm going to give you the hardest mission of all: how to become more safer developers, and things that you need to keep in mind. And it's a little bit the red thread. And for those who paid attention during the start of my session, I was playing a little bit of music, and that music came from this movie. And normally it goes a little bit longer, but Magnus still had to make some announcements, so I cut it to start early, and so that way you can go home on time. Normally there's a diva dance, and then she goes into from opera to techno, but you missed that part. But the fifth element, and why the fifth element? Well, for those who's never seen the movie, really? Okay, so I got some homework for you. Look it up, watch it. It's one of the best. Not yeah, it's the second best sci-fi movie ever made. It's from a director called Luc Besson. He has a lot of movies made, but The Fifth Element is great. The first best movie on sci-fi is, of course, Blade Runner. For those who disagree with me, come and fight with me in the hallway. We'll figure that out. But why The Fifth Element? Well, The Fifth Element is about a race of aliens that protect the universe against something enormous, which is pure evil. And they have a weapon in the form of Mila Jovovich, perfectly played by Mila Jovovich. She's wonderful in that movie. And she is what they call the perfect being. Now, and at a certain point in time, there's early 1900s, there's Luke Perry, you know that guy from Beverly Hills 90210, for the oldsters that were young in the 90s. Yeah? Guilty. They're in the middle of the desert, and there's this old professor like, oh yeah, this is great, and he finds this hieroglyphic with the four elements of life. So there's water, fire, earth, wind, four elements of life. So surrounding a fifth one. And he reads on the hieroglyphic the description. It says, in their position are the four elements of life. And these elements, when they are gathered around the fifth, the supreme being, ultimate warrior, created to protect life, is being gathered and is being created. This is about protection. This is about the security. And I want you to consider the four elements of development around the fifth, security. And this is what this talk is about. This is the red thread. All right. So first, a little bit about me. I'm Mike Martin. I'm the second Belgian today. I'm sorry that you have to sit through to two Belgians. Yeah? We don't have anything to say in our governments and all these things. We have 7 of those, the more than sufficient. But we're sorry here. We apologize. Typically, when we come around, there's always me. If it's not from him, it's me, and if it's not from me, it's from Martin probably. So there's always issues. I work for Microsoft. I'm what they call a cloud solution architect. I try to drive best practices, specifically with startups and scale-ups. So if you are something like that and you want to have a partnership with Microsoft, come and talk to me. I'm still here in the morning tomorrow. So if you're here, let's talk. You want to follow me on Twitter? Take Mike2kx. You can mail me at mima@microsoft.com and you can scan the QR code. By the way, QR codes, these are the threads in all of my slides. If you want to read upon something, just scan the damn thing. All fine. It's easier for you. So if I see you grabbing your phone, perfect. That means you're interactively listening, and I made my point already. A little bit of history. Who knows SolarWinds? Everybody. All right, or mostly. So you probably heard about SolarGate. We also use SolarWinds. Don't worry, we weren't impacted. But December 2020, there was this little issue with that small company called SolarWinds. What happened into their software, somebody got access to it, changed a couple of lines of code. That code got distributed, and all the impacted impacted customers. This requires some drink. All the impacted customers were actually being spilled down by ransomware. And the funny thing was, and I remember the column, there was this column in the New York Times stating, "Wow, and yeah, SolarWinds they got hacked, and it's all because of a little obscure software company called JetBrains." You have to know that JetBrains is actually the second or the third largest industry provider of IDEs and software for software development. They provide you with ReSharper, TeamCity, and it's about TeamCity that this thing is about. Yeah, little obscure company from the Balkan, and yeah, untrusted, and they actually hacked into the system. No, that's not true. What happened was somebody got a phishing email. Click, click, click. They got access into access into the software repository, and they changed 2 lines of code. I actually, it's sorry. I need to count better. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of code. 4 lines of code. That's it. Nothing more. What happened there is, and you see the difference. On the left-hand side, that's the original code. On the right-hand side, that's the change code. What happened there is that code that has been inserted was an infinite loop, started in a unknown thread, and this kept downloading command control software. And that command control software would then start downloading PowerShell scripts, and the rest is history. So, just by having access to the code repository, keep that in mind. You don't want to be next. You're next. All of you. So, a little bit of background reading for you. If my pen now would start, come on, really, technology, you gotta love it, right? Okay, it doesn't work anymore. Let's just do it like this. So, there's a little bit more information here. So, what I want to talk to you about today is the 4 pillars of software development. We talk about secure design. We talk about secure coding principles. We're going to talk about secure building, releasing, and we're going to talk about the secure ops deployment part. Those are the 4 elements, with security at its center. That's the 5th element. How does it sound? Interested? Okay, good. Let's go. Oh, by the way, it could be that I skip some of the slides. I have 60 slides at hand, so that's 1 slide per minute, but I have a lot of demos. So what's the issue here? Well, there's too many things that I need to show you. So I'll go over it. If I skip a few things that might be happening, or maybe I go over time, as I promised, for a couple of minutes. All right. So the first thing that we need to learn is that there is something called the SDL, or the software development lifecycle, or the security development lifecycle in this case, because we all know SDL, but it's also security development lifecycle. Most important thing on this slide is totally at the left. Yeah, left. Yeah, totally confuse myself sometimes. Education. Make sure that everybody in your organization who is building solutions, not software, building solutions, knows the risks of software development. Why is that? Because if you're aware, you know the pitfalls that you might run into. So education is mostly important. Teach them about not only about things like phishing and stuff, because you should have a corporate policy around that, but teach them about the risks of vulnerabilities found in software packages. All these things they need to be aware, and they don't need to be deep dive in there, but they need to be aware that these things exist. that control more with more privileges is more dangerous than least privilege. Things like that. Make sure that they are aware. And then if you're building your software, make sure that it's all processed and that you have good requirements gathering, that you have a decent design, that you do the implementation well, verify what you've been doing. Yeah? And then also in the end, and this is typically something that a lot of people forget, make sure that you have an incident response plan. Now, Microsoft, since I'm working for Microsoft, I can say we have, the people of WC and the Dutch, we have a template for that, which you can download, and a full Word document that actually says, well, in case of an emergency, do this, 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 and this, break the glass, do this, whatever. Make sure that you have something like that, because if dude hits the fan, since we're online, sorry kiddies, if dude hits the fan, at least you can recover from it. And disaster recovery is not the thing that you want to aim for. You want to be resilient and you want to be scalable, but yeah, make sure that you have that in place. Now, if we go into the detail of the SDL, we have 12 elements that we should work on. The things that I'm going to surely mention here is the provide training we already mentioned. Make sure that everybody's aware. I'm going to talk about threat modeling, talking about the risk of third-party components, making sure that you use approved tools. The bottom line, it's like choosing on the carnival, right? If you shot a couple of ducks, you can choose from the bottom line. We're going to talk about the bottom line, except for the standard incident response, as I already mentioned. You can just download this from the Microsoft site. Now, but before we do that, let's get something straight. Please make sure that you, in your entire organization, apply the principle of zero trust. And that's only 3 pillars that you need to remember. Hey, actually it works. 3 pillars, marketing. Great. 3 pillars. What is it? It's first of all, use least privilege access. Not too much, not too little, just enough. And ask for more if you need it. And for those who read Oliver Twist, can I have some more, sir? But also make sure that you verify explicitly. Who are you? What will you do? Where are you going? And what do you need? Verify that explicitly. But the most important part is that always go off of the breach assumption. There's always somebody hammering, tampering, getting into your network. And if you're doing cloud, getting into your solution or whatever the entry path that they have. And typically it takes them 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 months before it's being discovered, or not at all. Sometimes they're smart enough. Okay. And of course, make sure that you do identity in a correct way. Multipass. Lilo Dallas multipass. Why is this so important? Because it actually shows you the thing of sign in and a verification. And that verification in this case is multi-factor verification, multi-factor authentication. Make sure that you have all your environments enabled by these little things, which annoy our lives because we can email on that, but actually start using them for good. Enable your accounts with multi-factor authentication, even your GitHub accounts, your personal accounts. And you just need one app, an authenticator app, whether it's the Google one or ours, preferably ours. We have a market share there. But it can cover anything. We even have verified IDs today in Entra, which is just you upload your driver's license and you get a verified ID back, and we know that it's you. This is very important. So multi-factor authentication, there's no excuse for not using it. Why is it? Because if you have your phone near or a YubiKey or whatever, as long as you can do something multi-factor, it's great. But if you do that, you have explicitly verified that you're actually you and that you're actually verifying your identity on that matter. Now, let's go to the real job, the secure design part. So secure design is more about you design software from a functional aspect, from a technical aspect, but typically if you're doing design from a security point of view, you start looking at how my software will talk to all the components, what the flow is behind that. Yeah? And in the 90s, a couple of smart guys, smart people, it's more inclusive because there actually were a couple of women involved there too. So excuse me the expression. They came up with an acronym, and Microsoft is really good with acronyms. I mean, we have a glossary with about 1,800 of it. Whack, whack, what? Actually, some of them come back in multiform. So STRIDE is one of those acronyms, and this actually means spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. What are the things that can happen to your environment? Yeah? To give you an idea, denial of service, everybody knows a DDoS attack, or should know a DDoS attack. That is bringing down a service, making sure that it cannot be used, that it's no longer available. It's getting warm here. I find this jacket cool, but it's way too warm. All right. So availability in that case, but we also have a couple of them on the privilege part. So there's a lot of things that you can do here. But keep this in mind. This is a scoring mechanism to show in which category a software event or an event can happen security-wise in a full flow of your software. Now, why am I telling you this? There's also another one which comes typically along with it, which is dreadful or dread, which stands for the way it can be reproduced, how it can be exploited, and so on and so on. And this is actually the scoring mechanism on top of STRIDE. Now, why am I telling you this? Because this is the basis for something that we call threat modeling. Now, threat modeling is very simple, simply explained, 4 steps. The first thing that you need to do is, what are you building? What are you doing? That's the model. You design a model. And then you go like, what could possibly go wrong? And this is something we love to use in software development, right? So what could possibly go wrong? The threat identification. And then what are you going to do about it? How can you mitigate it? That's the last step. Validate. Verify explicitly. Validate. Did I do a good job? And this is a constant process. Now, this is just for your reading. There we go. It's not only about the mechanism behind it, it's also of visualization, making sure that you actually have a checklist that you can do. And for that, we have a free tool, which has been existing for a long time already, but not a lot of people know this. It's called the TMT, nothing to do with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, TMTN. But it's called the Threat Model Tool. Now, either you use this one or another free one, which is Threats Manager Studio or threatsmanager.com, which is also being built by somebody internal as a hobby, Simone Curzi. He works on Microsoft, but he actually was one of the largest contributors on this thing. But he now has his own product, but it's really, really cool, and you can use it for free. Now, the cool thing about TMT is that if we open it up, let me take one here, you can make these cool drawings. As you can see here, it looks a little bit like Visio. So you have drag and drop stuff, and you have, yeah, this is generic. Let me just take one specifically for Azure. And that's why one of the reasons I'm showing you it, because we have a template specifically for Azure environments that you can actually use it for. There we go. Let's make this a little bit smaller. As you can see here, what this does is you draw your flows, your endpoint flows, between all the different aspects that are talking to each other. So let's say that you want to authenticate yourself against an AAD because you're using Azure DevOps. This is a flow in your software development lifecycle. So it also becomes a weakness, as you can see here. So here we have like streaming data that's coming into HTTPS. Unfortunately, it's a little bit, yeah, it's not sharp, but I cannot do much about it. Here it goes into the event hub. And then from here out, it goes to the data lake store. And you see all these little lines and all these attributes here. And the cool thing is if I just click on one of those, you will see that each of these elements will have attributes configurable, which are properties, which can be any of the unsafe endpoints. So things that have to do with communication. And then you have the way that you're going to communicate with something. So here, if you click on these lines, you will actually see that it will get you how is that data flow ordering, and you can set all these attributes. It requires a little bit of understanding on how your software will be built. But then you say, yeah, but what do I do with this thing? Well, the cool thing about this is a drawing phase, but you also have, and this is way more interesting, an analysis phase. So if we go to the analysis view, you will actually see here a total list of all the things that could possibly go wrong. That doesn't mean that your system will be impacted by it, but at least you know which can be happening. Now, as you can see here, stride category. That's why I mentioned it. So it is already being categorized. Now, the cool thing about it is that you can also have a state on which you're going to work on. Mitigated, non-mitigated, and so on and so on. So you can actually change those. If I highlight this, for instance, you can actually change these here where it's are you willing to do it or not willing to do it? All right, it's for some reason it's not. All right, needs investigation, not applicable, mitigated. So that means you have it. Now, the best part of it all, as you can see, I highlighted this thing. It will also highlight this on the plan itself. So at least you know in which steps you are. And for the best part of it all is because typically these are security people that are working on it, but you also want a checklist generated on this. You can fully export this as an HTML page, and you can just inject this into your wiki of your dev environment, and then you can get started. So if I go here into reports, and I say create a full report, I can say any of these. Hey, this is new since this morning. Just just install the new version because it's a click once installation. It gets updated so many times. So if I now do a generate report, you will actually see that it will ask me where to save this thing. And as any good secure solution for saving, I'm doing this on the desktop. So this is Cloudburst D2 2022. Here we go. And normally it should ask me where I want to open this, or it will already open it. Ah, there you have it. Of course, opens it into the browser window of StreamYard, so making sure that I don't close that, because else way our dear Erica will be very mad at me. And here you have the full report. As you can see, I still highlighted that, and all these pieces will be taken out. So if you don't highlight anything, it will not look yellow. It will be more white. So that's a bug that's still in there, as you can see. And there you have the full overview of all the different pieces that you have, and you can see all the elements. And who did not never heard about this? Right, a lot of people. Good. Are you going to use it from now on? So it's something that you need to get used to, but it's also useful for something that is already existing. But if you're doing something new, this might be useful to make sure that you're also compliant with certain things and so on and so on. Right. Next step. All right, I can close this thing, and I can close this thing. So we have this. Now, accompanying this, there's also a list of guidance that we have. Of course, we have the Azure Architecture Center, which is a really cool document place. But there's also an additional environment where you can read upon all the SDL impacts on an Azure environment. And this thing is called the SKF, or the SDL Knowledge Framework. I see somebody using an iPad to scan the QR codes. Perfect. So the SDL Knowledge Framework is actually a list of all the things that could possibly go wrong, or all the things that you need to know to start building your software. Now, this can be compared to one of the knowledge bases that we typically give to people. Look at this for the service limits and all these things. This is a little bit the same, but then specifically for security matters. And if you take a look at this, the cool thing about this thing is where is it? No, it's not this one. I can close this. The cool thing about this is, here we are, and I need this one. You actually get a lot of things. First of all, you can download some sample models where you can get started from. If you look at the landing page, you actually can just browse on the guidance, and then you can select the things that you want to browse on. And there's some evil things like ADFS. Nobody wants to do that. It's the worst thing ever. But you can also just say, I want to talk about, let's say, a certain product, so components. And since we have a project, a PM here, let's talk about service bus. Because, these guys, you cannot trust them. Is it more up? Did I miss it? Ah, here it is. Oh, here we go. So if I highlight this and I just apply the filters, you'll see that there's a couple of things that you need to keep into account when you're using Service Bus. For one thing, ensure that access keys are securely stored in Key Vault, for instance. That makes sense. So you don't go sharing keys. And if you then click on this, you will actually see what could go wrong and what the mitigations can be, the threat that are mapped, and what the mitigations can be, and what you can use against those. So perfectly good reference to use. And free, as everything else in my talk. No, it's not true. I actually have some licenses to sell, but it's another story. Premium features. Talk to him. All right. Yeah, that's gonna be a running joke from now on. You know what the downside is? I see him more in these traveling circuses, so that joke will always land somehow. Hmm. All right, let's talk about the coding principles then. How am I doing on time? Hmm. Oh, it's 10. Okay, perfect. All right, let's first start with the tools that you're going to use. Okay, everybody loves a good IDE and tools and all these things. All right. But if you want to have a little bit more control, the biggest issue is that most developers don't like it that IT admins install tools for them. Yeah. Having an automated deployment of Visual Studio, not the best experience for those who have ever done that. But let's say that we can just prepare images and guardrailed environments to do development. And two tools come to mind, which is DevBox, which we announced a couple of weeks ago. DevBox, what is it? It's actually a developer's uh, landing zone portal for Windows 365, managed and patched on one side, but monitored on one side by the IT pro guys, but totally controlled by the Azure people and the Azure project. And what you do is if you open up the Azure portal, you will actually get this view. Is it? It's this one, I think. Yeah, it's this one. So what you see here, this is just an M36. Yeah, it will probably refresh. There you go. So it's this what you're gonna get. You're gonna get a VM that can run in the browser, so you can access it from everywhere. That's already good with beefy stuff. You have a developer portal that can actually allow you to sign in and just generate one on the fly by the SKUs that are provided by the end user. So if you really want to have a very beefy machine, you can just do this. There we go. Go where it's securely stored. App. You'll actually get this kind of a view where you can say, I want to generate a new dev box and provisioned on a VM that is running actually behind the scenes in Azure, but it's actually managed through M365. Now, the reason why this is important is because you immediately get full AAD access. It can be coupled to your Microsoft 365 environment, conditional access, privileged identity management, and so on can all be provisioned because of the AAD part. But you actually get to choose how to run it, either in the RDP client or through the browser, which is lightweight because you can now use also an iPad Pro, for instance, and where you can run a full-fledged Visual Studio with no lag whatsoever. And you can easily create them based upon the pool that you provide. So we get beefy machines, 8 CPUs, 32 gigs of RAM, even 64, depends on what you decide on. And from a project point of view, you actually have a dev environment, dev center where you can even add dev environments, deployment environments where you can also immediately test your software. Next to that, we also make sure that we can, if you want to do more lightweight development, you can actually, and with more lightweight development, I mean not specifically the more beefier stuff in Visual Studio, but sometimes you just want to have access into something like Visual Studio Code, but you want to make sure that it actually gets deployed in a proper way. You can use dev containers in code spaces. Add the dev container with all the tools that you need immediately installed into the dev container, add it to your code repository. And from there, you can start a code space and you have a fully functional environment already set up for you with the same secure principles and the same tools that everybody uses. And that way you have control about it. And if it's a private repository, you can actually set permissions on those. Yeah, it will take a while to run, but you get the idea. It's just a Visual Studio shell in the browser. But behind it is even an even more powerful tool, which is called the VS Code server, which you can also address on VS Code, and you can also use the diff container there. So think about it, right? Management on top of that. Now, then we also have to talk about coding vulnerabilities. And this is where it typically goes wrong. That's the education part that we were talking about earlier. And there's this concept of that we call OWASP. OWASP is an open organization which is talking about web vulnerabilities and web accessible security issues. We typically talk about the OWASP top 10. One of the most well-known is the SQL injection one, but there's also cross-site scripting as one and so on. And you can always read upon them every year or every 2 years. They renew that list. The most important one that we know and the easiest one to actually abuse is SQL injection, because a lot of developers don't do SQL development in a correct way. With SQL, I mean any kind of SQL. If you have a query that you need to run, make sure that you parameterize it and don't string it. If you do a stringing, you just break off the string by saying and point comma semicolon 1 equals 1 semicolon, and you can start whatever query you want. In SQL, it's easy. Select star from XP underscore, and you have access to the system. You can generate a user, and before you know it, lateral movement happening. So these are the things that you need to keep in mind. If you do that with parameters, you cannot bypass that, and the validation will happen on the parameter level. Yeah. So there's other organizations that are using that are providing the same kind of guidance. There's SANS with the top 25, so they go a little bit beyond that. Most of these things are being reinstated in even governance and compliance things, so keep that in mind. But one of the more important ones is this one, the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposure Database, or the CVE.mitre.org. Everybody in the world is actually using those databases to re-inject that into their software in their security products. Typically for discovering vulnerabilities in any kind of software product. So let's say dependencies in NuGet packages, NPM, Maven, but also in just software with holes. Okay, so keep those in mind. So that brings us to the more lower levels of real work that you're doing as a developer, and that is something that we call the shift left movement. We're gonna move the liability and accountability of software security no longer to the edge, because in the past it was always, hey, firewalls, security, poof. Networking, poof. That's security. Okay, good, we're good. Somebody had a bouncer, yeah. Yeah, they're bouncers because box moving, heavy, they grow some muscle. But actually, what you want to do is make sure that your developers also understand that if their code, by starting with OWASP, that they don't do these things, but also other stuff. Like, for instance, something like this. Don't store secrets in your code. Right. So who's still using web.config files? Nobody. Good. Okay. Good. But nobody wants to. Yeah, and you all probably put your connection strings in there, I think, right? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You get it. Yeah, exactly. But that's exactly what you want to avoid. It's these things. But even API keys, tokens, all these secrets, you don't want to store them there. You want to make sure that you address them by either a managed identity service principle, by guidance of a NuGet package that you can implement, which can do the secret management a little bit for you. This is an older slide, but you get the idea, which can talk immediately to Key Vault, and through the identity authentication, which is verified explicitly, zero trust, you can actually just access that key and you get the result back. But what if you do check in some keys and that you made a boo-boo and that Monday morning, not enough coffee, or Friday afternoon, I'm fed up with this entire week, I need beer? That was not, by the way, a call for action, gentlemen. No, but if you do make that mistake, then toot can hit the fan again. There's a lot of toot going on with fans in regards. Because if you check in secrets in any kind of software repository, you will have a lot of work to do because you commit it, and by the moment you commit it, it's in your history. And guess what? Histories are browsable, even by just read access. So, what do we have here? To avoid credentials leaking inside of your, and there's actually a funny story. In a couple of years ago, I think it's 2012, somewhere-ish, there was this little bookstore cloud that had a little weakness into their S3 buckets. And by the means of the usage of pre-shared keys, you could actually use the pre-shared key, get access to the bucket, and then from there out actually could pull yourself into the cloud console of AWS and create virtual machines. All right. Let it be that at that point in time, there's a new certain technology being brought up called Bitcoin. So you get where I'm going, right? So what happened is a lot of people actually checked in pre-shared keys of their S3 buckets, not knowing that they're actually checking it in, or not knowing that it is a risk. And a lot of malicious guys and girls were just scanning GitHub, pages and pages of GitHub repositories just for those keys, using those and making sure that you could do Bitcoin mining on the account of you, and you. Because hey, it's a pre-shared key. I can use it, right? I got the key, I got the secret, I'm happy. So this is what happened. So you don't want those credentials to be leaked inside or inside of your repositories. If it does happen, since a couple of years, Microsoft, actually GitHub, implemented GridScan, and GridScan is an XA that we used to have on the Visual Studio side by means of the continuous delivery tools for Visual Studio. That's version 2017. It doesn't work anymore, so don't go looking for it. Unless you're still developing with Visual Studio 2017, God forbid that you do, because we also stopped that. What we do here is we actually scan from the moment you do a push inside of the repository and you get an alert. Now, for public repositories, we've been doing this from the beginning. Now, for private repositories, you can also do this with advanced security. And the cool thing about this is if you have that, I show you this. No, it's not this one. I can actually close this one because I don't need this anymore. I have way too many windows open. Yeah, I can leave. Up, leave. There we go. So let's say I'm just going to open up GitHub Actions. Voila. This is my most favorite spot of the entire GitHub world, because this is a very unsecured software, piece of software. It's called the Juice Shop. It's used to capture the flag, but also all the worst practices of software development are in there. Perfect. And what I have here is, you see this little security thing. I can click on this and you will actually see that there's a secret scanning in here. And secret scanning actually is being enabled on advanced security. Cool thing is, it will also come to Azure DevOps now. Yay! Paying though, so those are the licenses. Please pass by the cash register when you leave. All right. And what I did here is, stupid me, I have a web.config. Guess what? Yeah. So what I did here is I actually put in a connection string, put in the full database. Oh, you can take pictures. It doesn't work anyway. The database doesn't exist. And I even made it even worse by just adding also my user and my password. This will hurt bad, right? And to make sure that I don't lose a secret, I added it also in a text file with secrets. Just to make sure. Just to make sure. Now, yeah, that's called secrets, just to make sure. Now, actually, what happens here is that you can see that alerts actually gave up. Yeah, the secret is compromised because it's already so deep inside of my pull request. Cool thing is now you can do this on push. You can stop it from the terminal or from the tool that you're using, and you can even use it before the commit, before you're committing it. So this is actually a new feature that we have in GitHub. So you can actually avoid these things and don't be stupid like me. Now, it's not only about making sure that you don't do boo-boos in code with all these credentials and stuff. It's also about best coding practices. there used to be a very good one out of the Microsoft DevLabs part, which is called the Security Intelligence. This one is no longer working if you're above 2019, if you're 2022. But this one was really, really good specifically for Azure because this came from the AZSK. So fortunately, we stopped our project, but it's still worthwhile downloading all these tools because I'm going to show you a couple of things that you might be useful just to do on your PC before you actually do something in CI/CD pipelining. You also want to test here. But the reason why I'm still showing you this is because there's good alternatives too, free ones, either by us, DevSkim, working for multiple languages, working for multiple IDEs. It also works with IntelliJ and all these things. VS Code, we have plugins for that. And security code scan for 2019 and up, which is a very good one. It's by somebody outside of Microsoft, but it's a really, really good one. And this is just a Roslyn analyzer that will analyze your code on the fly, order by build or whatever. So you can enable this on the fly, or you can just be enabling it after the build. So what I have here, just to show you this in action, told you I had a lot of demos. Cool thing is, yeah, here we go. So here I have an error list based upon code. It's an explicitly unsecure C# project, and this is one of them that comes out of the DevSkim one. So here you can see, and it also points back to an error report, which is actually a CVE for the coding part. What I did also add here is an additional tool that you can use, which is called Snyk. And Snyk has a CLI that you can use to check your code also on this code principles. Cool thing is if you're using Node developers here, Node.js, JavaScript, okay. No drinking problems? Yeah. No, but if you're using Node, for instance, and you use npm audit, this actually under the hood also uses that one, just to check the dependencies and the validity still of the packages. So, and they actually have a pretty good set of tools, very expensive. So you need to choose between GitHub Advanced Security or ours. Yeah, depends a little bit, but I think they're worthwhile mentioning because for me they're a scale up, and they're partners with Microsoft anyway with GitHub. So I'm good. So these tools are important, and you can actually see here that if you run those, you can actually do a scan. If you do that scan, you'll see that there's vulnerabilities coming out of that. Probably click on this one, for instance, you will see that there's reading settings, and you can see that XML reader settings are not, this one is obsolete. It's this one, could not be found, right? There's a couple of things in here that are not correct. And here you can see, like, for instance, this line has open redirect anti-forgery. This is one of the OS parts, as you can see on ASP.NET and so on and so on. Depends on what you're using, what your source is of awesome. All right. Now, it's not only about the coding itself, but it's also the access to the systems, as I've already proven with Solorigate, right? You want to apply the principle of least privilege, but also the way you configure it, because that was actually the real issue with TeamCity. They misconfigured it so they have open access inside the company. Well, pity, it happens. We're all humans, right? I don't know if there are any robots in the rooms. I want to be inclusive, but no AI? Okay. Yeah, and Ellen is already gone. So, but there's a couple of things that you can do here, or also protect your DevOps infrastructure. Since DevOps is partially tooling, partially people, partially processes, there's a couple of things that you can actually use. And for those who are using Azure DevOps still, and DevOps is not dead, huh? Azure DevOps is not dead. We're still working on that. Just has been quiet now, but we just released a bunch of updates and new stuff. Huh? Yeah. All right. What we have here is we have a widget, which also comes from the AZSK, which does ADO scanning. What this does, and this is really, really cool, it will actually scan your entire environment. Here it is. And it will give you... I have way too many things open. I think it's this one. No, it's not this one. No, it's not this one. It's this one. It will give... No? Come on. Don't tell me that I didn't open it. To give you reports on... Yeah, so this is the widget that you need, the plugin that, and you need to do a little build on top of that. And once you've built that, you can actually get this. I think I closed it for some reason. Oh, no, there it is. And this will give you a scan result based upon the security of the organization. Don't use third-party users. Use only authenticated users inside of your org and stuff like that. And it fails deliberately. I'm not that stupid. You wouldn't take me for granted, I know, but and do not enable access for external users. Justify all members are, and you just have to do, and you get a good report on what needs to be happening, and also a little bit of linking back to the things that you could improve on project level. And then you can also scan not only the organization, but also the pipeline. So here we have, like, for instance, a security pipeline, just made it a little bit smaller, where you can actually see I have so many connections, one with SPNs, one with sub-level access, and so on, and you get a full overview of what is actually going wrong here. Use that. Only costs you a build once every so many times, and you can actually compare different parts, right? And it comes for free. That brings us to the secure building part, and I see that I need to speed up again, because I only have 15 minutes. I didn't close the stream, right? Because I see you moving into action, Erika. The stream's still good? Okay. So secure building, there's a lot of stuff that you can do to do statistical analysis security testing. There's actually two testing types that you need to do for those who paid attention. Lower row, there's DAST and SAST. So SAST is the one that you do during your build. Things like code coverage and all these things, cyclomatic complexity and all these things, they come from code coverage. Same level, but now for security. And there's a lot of tools available for that. Pick your flavor, pick your battle. Preferably GitHub's CodeQL. So everything which is code scanning, you can actually use. To give you an idea, code scanning, oh, that's Visual Studio. I can close this one too. Where is the browser here? Here we go. So if I would say, I'm going to go in here. Voila, and there's code scanning here. As you can see, I have 5,000 issues. I also added issues from other scanners to make sure that I have a lot of them. And if you make that scanning automatically, that's code scanning really easily to set up. You just add a scanning tool, and typically if you just start up, you just get this window where you say, I want to start a workflow. It just starts an action, and you just pick your battles here. If you do CodeQL analysis, it will be available immediately into the flavor of the language that it recognizes in your repository. If it's not a supported language, yeah, sorry, you have to look for something else. But typically there's more languages in there, and you can configure it through the YAML file. Now, the cool thing about these things is that you have a lot of things coming back, and once it finds an issue, it will actually generate an issue, and you can follow up on it. You can create a board on projects, and you can follow up on it. Create work items in Azure DevOps, and you can follow up on it. You get, like for instance here, I have hard-coded credentials. If the secret scanning doesn't find it, it will still be covered by CodeQL because there's another pattern here behind it. You see what's happening. You have additional information, some recommendations that you have. So it's more than just finding an issue, but also telling you why and learning, bringing you back to that educational part. So very important. And there's a couple of more. There's also like Veracode Sneak also as a plugin for those, and you get the idea, right? So there's a lot of things that you can actually do. Bringing me back to that deprecated thing, still download it. Why? Because you don't only want to scan your code, you also want to scan your infrastructure as code and want to verify explicitly what's going on there. And for those things, I'm just going to open up, and I already apologize because Magnus gave me a great tip earlier. What I do is I love a good shell, but as you can see, it's a little bit like not readable maybe for your experience. What I could do is, let me just quickly do this, voila, and now I can do this. Let's see if that's better. No, it's not better. Let's try that again. No, okay, not better. Right. What I did here is I have a couple of tools that you can run inside of your terminal just to test some things. But you can also use these in CI/CD. That's why it's so important. But I'm going to show you on screen what actually happened. First thing that you can do is ARM testing. Bicep and ARM are, deployables for Azure. We're talking about Azure, but it also works with Terraform. And the first thing I'm going to show you is I have an ARM template here which deploys a web app with a managed MySQL behind it. What I'm going to show you here is I'm first going to talk to you about ARM-TTK. And ARM-TTK is you're going to test a template and you're going to validate all the APIs that you're going to call, but also some best practices in there. Is it explicitly security? No, but if you're talking to the oldest API, you probably will not have some of the features that implicitly do security testing. So test AZ template, which comes with the ARM-TTK, you just do this and you get a full report back on all the tests that it can find. And as you can see here, some old values, but it tests again minimum and maximum values. Out must not contain secrets. So you get the idea. This gives you a full list, and you can actually walk through this into detail of all the things if something goes wrong. Now another one, and I'm speeding up. You get all the slides, you get all the other tools to see too. Another one that we also use is, and this is coming back for the old tool where we got started on, is AZ Escape. Why am I explicitly talking about that? There's still things in there that are valid if you don't want to use Azure Defender for Cloud, because here you're going to scan before you're actually going to deploy. Azure Defender for Cloud is more security posture afterwards, but it also does the same checks. And there's actually an additional tool behind it that I'm going to show in just a second. So here we have the security part. So, and it comes with a module called AZ Escape. Just download it. Just like the ARM-TTK, it's called ARM-TTK. And you're going to download it. What you're going to do is get AZ SK ARM template security status, and you're going to see how secure that template is, what the best practices are in there. So let's do this. And what this will do is this will generate a, as you can see, it just opened on my other screen. I get my mouse to, here we are. Get my mouse to focus again. It opened up my Explorer, and it created a CSV file and the log output. Now, the CSV file is just a checklist of all the things that you see in here, and here you can actually see where it failed, on what parts, and it will give you the recommendations for it. So here I have BCDR use multiple instances. I'm using one, not a good practice, and all these things that you can have about. You have a matrix where you can actually see what's going on, little table, and that CSV file actually brings you there. So if you then do move that data into multiple columns, put a table on top of it, you can actually use this as a filter report, and so on and so on. Pretty cool stuff. I'm going to wait with the other one. No, I'm just going to do that immediately. Sometimes you also have policies in place. You want to test against those policies too. Who ever heard about PS rule, policies for PowerShell? Nobody. Oh, at least one person. There's one PowerShell lover. Okay. Okay. But you also have PS rule for Azure explicitly. And that full set can be used in combination with all the rules that you have in policies, and you can validate against them. And here I have an example. I already run it, and here you can see, like, consider removing any output values that return secret values in code. So it's actually a little bit the same. And this is what Security Center actually on the hood uses. It's open source. You can build your own. You can work on top of that. Okay. Pretty cool tooling. All the QR codes are in the deck. So and I will deliver the deck tomorrow after my session is gone. And the security tent, forget about that, just read about that. Which is more important is if you do coding, third-party access. Everybody uses some kind of package form, NuGet, Maven, whatever. Please use a dependency checker, because this is typically where either namespace addressing has gone wrong, you just download the wrong package, or there's vulnerabilities in there because there's third parties. They also build software, and that software can also use dependencies and vulnerabilities. And this is explicitly showing what was I going to say? This is explicitly using the CVE files. So here we can go back into the security part. And here you have dependabot, and this will scan based upon the package.json or the package definition that you have. This will scan for the packages itself that it finds in there into the definition, and it will give you recommendations whether it's outdated. It can automatically update it and build it and check it, and before it merges, it sends you a pull request back and works like that. or it can automatically do the pull request and do the merging for you too. If it fails, it will retry. If it still fails, it will give you a pull request at the end. Yeah? But you can automate this thing. That's the beauty of it. It does this for vulnerabilities, versions, and for all the things that are out of date or even deprecated if necessary. And as you can see, it gives you back a lot of information. In this case, this is a latest possible version needs to be installed. Earliest fixed version is 0.4.0, and as you can see, I'm still running 2. Something something. So, and all the CVE information with the direct link to the database. Very important, very nice. There's other free tools that you can use, like White Source Bolt, which is now Mint. It's no longer White Source, it's Mint. And Snyk also does that. An exceptional tool is SonarCube. Sam already talked about technical debt. Technical debt typically is also accompanied by security issues, and vice versa. Doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, as he said, but sometimes you do have to work down to that list. SonarCube actually helps you managing technical debt on a larger scale, but also nowadays they have reporting in there. If you don't want to install it yourself in a container or on a server, because you need some infrastructure for that, there's Sonar Cloud, which has exactly the same mindset. And less plugins. That's the thing. For those who were in the Premier support contract and they were using security code analysts, sorry that we killed it off, but at least we have an alternative, DevOps CLI, which is a NuGet package that you can install. And guess what? We have CredScan back. Because we can install that package locally and we can run CredScan. So here we have CredScan. Here we go. And it's part of the Guardian package. Where's my mouse? There we go. And what this does, it can actually scan. So I just do a Guardian run. It will generate a little file like a .github file, .git folder, git ignore folder. And there you have the recommendations and the configuration in there. And if you then run this, it will scan against templates for EAC. It will scan against bin scheme for vulnerabilities in code, and it will also scan for CredScan. If you just want to use it for CredScan, just do -t CredScan 2. I don't know why they called it 2, but they changed the name of the thing. So now you actually have the CredScan exit back at your local machine, so you can actually work with that. Use it if you don't want to use all the other tools, but at least scan before you commit. And you can use this entire thing in a CI/CD form, whether in GitHub Actions or in Azure DevOps or in Jenkins. It's just downloading the package, and there's typically an action involved for that one. And what you can do with this, and this is maybe nice to show, because I actually have that here. I have an action here, which is a multi-schema, a multi-stage action. Here we go. And from here out, I actually built, you cannot see it that well. That's the downside of this thing. As you can see, it's multiple things. What I actually do here is I also scan with that CLI. I do this in this part, the Microsoft security scan, and it will do some outputs. The cool thing about it is that it also creates a SATIF file, which is a universal log mechanism to log security issues. And you can just analyze this with Visual Studio Code with the log viewer, or Visual Studio because it has a log plugin. As I mentioned, there's also GAS for AZDO. Yeah, so we now can start using it. It's in private preview. It will go public preview anytime soon, but we announce it. So keep your eyes open on that one. I wonder how the feedback will be on that one. There's also something coming up, hopefully, still this year. They've been promising it since last year. It was a small announcement last year that built a very small one, and we also have code signing as a service. Done it. What we can do here is signing PowerShell scripts, signing our commits, signing our packages, our coding packages like NuGet packages and all these things, but also our MSIX for those who need to build packages to deploy software. So you don't need to have a certificate server anymore available. You can do this by this service, and it's a validated, automated system where you can also bring your own certificate. Pretty cool. I talked about code analysis. I'm almost there. I'm just going to go over time with another 4 minutes. So for once, it's about the same time, but now I actually finished it all. When we talk about secure deployment, there's RBAC. Policies and RBAC are your best friends. And RBAC least privilege, again, make sure that everybody has either a managed identity or, as Magnus showed you this morning, make sure that you understand these principles and apply them. Yeah. If you want to have governance on top of that, then blueprints or template specs in this case, because blueprints is kind of a shadier question nowadays, where you also deploy the basis for your templates. Maybe take a little bit of a look at CAF. For those who know the cloud adoption framework, maybe take a little bit of a look at that. But what the most important part is the combination of RBAC with policies, because here you will not allow certain things to be deployed, and your CI/CD environments will also keep that into recommendation and recognition. If you say, yeah, but what about Kubernetes? Because I want to have policies there too. Well, we have OPA. And for the Dutch, it's not Grandad. It's Open Policy Agents, which is implemented in Kubernetes and where you can actually apply the same policies together with Azure policy inside of your Kubernetes environment. This is something still being built on, but it's something where we actively work on. And you can also test these with this little tool here. I talked about PS rule again. We already mentioned it. That brings us to the last pillar, the monitoring part. Security monitoring is not only about SIEM or SOAR. For those who don't know what a SIEM is, it's a security intermediate event mechanism or management tool, like Sentinel, for instance. It's not about that. It's more about how did I deploy? What am I doing again? And validating all those things. And security posture. Am I doing a great job? And am I actually changing it? But of course, you want to have some alertings and some threat management on top of that too. Now, the first tool that comes to mind is Defender for Cloud. Specifically, if you're doing container business, and I'm not talking about Maersk, I'm talking about building containers. We have a plugin called Defender for Containers, which monitors and manages the security management on top of Kubernetes and containers. And it injects even with GitHub in a very fun and specific way, because if you take a look here, I think I have it here. Here we go. And we go to our Defender for Cloud environments. Here we go. This is Defender for Cloud. Every single time I do a build, I'm injecting my container inside of a container registry. But there could be vulnerabilities in there, root access and all these things. All these stupid things that I can do. Right? I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. And in this case, you have something called, in the inventory, you have something called, where is it? Come on, workload protections, there we go. You have this little container image scanning thing. And this will actually scan your containers even before or after they've been put into the registry, whether it's a public or a non-public registry. Yeah, sorry, you have to be a little bit faster because I'm going to click through. But the cool thing is, I have a registry here, which is an affected resource. Here we are. Where is it? Come on. Just make it a little bit smaller again. Yeah, sorry. Here we go. So I have this one. Yes, as you can see here, CI/CD critical findings. Actually, this one is being hooked up with Security Center and my repository. What happens here, if I go into my TX2 actions where that juice shop is actually being built in, you will actually see that, once it is there, I have a found image with security issues. And as you can see, it has CI/CD scan findings. Now, the cool thing here is you see the issues that are being displayed, but you also see here this little eye. If I hover over this thing, you will actually see the repository URI, the run URL, where it all went bad, the branch, and the git commit code. So that way you can verify explicitly what you've been doing, and you can start working on the issues. That's one thing. So a little bit on how it works and what it can do with it. But we even went a step further, and last week we announced Defender for DevOps, where we're going to implement a little bit of these things, but we're also going to check on the thing that I showed you earlier with the ADO scan. Here we can have the control over our entire infrastructure for CI/CD and DevOps, and where we can see, actually, if I'm going back to this one, there we go. you will actually see that there's now a new tab called DevOps Security Preview, where you can actually just onboard your repositories, your organizations, your Azure DevOps environments, if it's willing to load. There we go. Where you can add your environment by GitHub or Azure DevOps. So it's not dead. We're still supporting it. We're still working on it, for those who want to pick that fight. But the cool thing is that you can actually just drive in there and say, all right, you, dear fellow, you made a big mistake because you didn't do code scanning. You didn't enable the Pendabot, and it's going to give you all the best practices for all these things. For Azure DevOps, you have the same thing, a little bit like I showed you with AZDL, but not everything is in there. So use them combinedly, and you have a great solution. All right. That brings us to the last topic, the very last thing. I still have a couple of slides that you can use. A lot of tools on here. The dynamic testing, because the last phase is after you deploy into test, you want to make sure that everything that you did, you want to validate that. Did I do SQL injection? Did I mitigate that? Yeah? And for this, you can use a tool, free tool from the OWASP organization called ZAP. ZapScan is a hitless container that you can run that has an API that you can call. There's even a public one that you can call, which is being secured callback, and you just can implement that inside of your CI/CD pipeline. It will give you a ZapScan report back, and actually can show you this because I have this still open here. So I showed you earlier. Where was that? Where did I put it? It's this one, right? Yeah, it's this one. As you can see here, I have this as a last result. It also builds me an artifact, and that artifact is actually, that artifact is actually this one, the ZapScan, which is a zip file which contains some XML, and you can then start following up on what's going on. What it does underneath the hood is pretty cool because you can actually run that thing, and just react. You can actually run that thing as a full application tool inside of a browser. It looks a little bit like a Windows 95 application, but that's what you get with open source developers because they typically no, don't laugh. It's typically because they use the Linux environments. It runs on a Linux box, and hence why the UI stays the same. So if you don't have a shell on top of it, what this does is, can I just maximize this for a second? Yes, I can. What you can see here, I did a scan earlier on my deployed web shop. And here you can see all the alerts that are happening here. And do I still have some secrets in here? Yeah, server leaks. I have some private IP disclosure going out. And you can actually just use this as a list and make sure that you can actually really fully repair everything which is in here. I cannot. There's nothing underneath there, so that's good. Oh, all right. There you go. You have it. So you can see all the private IPs coming back. You get all the JSON back and all the information back that you're going to work on. As you can see, local hosts and all these things. Bad practices. I did a bad job. I put in almost into production. Now I can go back to the drawing board and start repairing that. You do this at a UAT level or a testing level. Yeah. You can also use this as a cross-validation in production, but make sure that you then first at least talk to your security people on the edge, so where the real security happens, real security, because this will typically be seen as a DDoS attack, because you're actually scanning the full environment. You're going to do that scan. Now, to give you even a little bit more headache, I had one slide which I always find very, very, very useful. It's this one. No. Come on. It's this one. Whoa, yeah, this is our cybersecurity reference architecture. Mark Siemens had a lot of fun. It's actually a build-up slide, and you can download this slide in a total security workbook. It's a PowerPoint presentation about 150 slides, CISO workshop, and all these things in there. Yeah, ak.ms/mcra, and it has all the tools that go hand in hand, end to end. A little bit of the story that I'm telling you here, but also with the impact to M365, detonation boxes, all these things. The impact to Defender on the PC, information protection and PIM, as he explained to you this morning. IoT, Defender for cloud on servers. We don't want to do servers, but all these things. And it's fully interactive. You also have the operations center with Sentinel. How our tools work together now. You have an end-to-end security landscape. All right, there's more resources into the slide deck, but most important one is Lilo Sit. Big bada boom. Thank you. Yeah, okay, that was 9 minutes overtime. Sorry. Yeah.